16 times the charm, everyone. Just remember, if you fail once, just keep trying. Get back on that horse 16 times and you'll get it right.
Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland, 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 Dixieland,
All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in once again to Dixieland the Proletariat. We're going to talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Make sure to like us on social media at Dixieland the Proletariat, or find all of our links at our link tree. That's linktree/.pro, DOT-PRO, where if you want to give your wages to a bunch of rednecks, you'll find a link to our Patreon. We got a lot of cool stuff to give you, including CDs, stickers, a cookbook, Discord server, and exclusive episodes. We also have a Spotify playlist with some great artists you all should check out, as well as our merch store. This podcast is brought to you by a horrible job market, medical debt, living at home, aging parents, Kaiser pushing white men in the swamps, Nelson's love life, Tyler's testosterone levels, Mark's laughter, which brings joy to the masses, and the committee to elect Kevin McCarthy Speaker of the House. If at first you don't succeed, then try 16 more times and give up on your dignity. Shout out to our new Patreon subscribers, Nancy, Jay, Nick, Connor, and Tristan. Our intro music is by Psychotic Refuge. Our producer is Mr. Speaker. Our monthly Patreon surplus goes to groups that are run by and are help marginalized people directly. As always, I'm Nelson with...
I don't have a good intro this time. It's been so long since we did a whole episode. I'm here. I don't know.
I might be here. I'm there.
Oh my God.
Theoretically here.
Theoretically. And our guest this evening is...
Not Andrew Tate. I don't want to set anybody. I have 0 Bugattis. So.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God.
I am Don Guillory, of Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yay!
Nice.
Back again.
I don't know what. There had to be. This must be part of like a resolution for you guys, because I was sitting there, was like, they're not going to invite me back.
Oh.
Then you call me, and I'm like, they lost a bet.
No, it's because you're a fellow
be,
member of the Ball Brotherhood. We're
I will
coming
be
in strong.
completely serious about
I
it.
understood that reference.
Yes. Finally, somebody.
We were thinking of like what guests we wanted on, like pretty much directly after our last episode with you, and we're like, oh well, Donald talked about coming back. And we're like, okay, we can ask him. Oh no, we shouldn't ask him like directly after. We should probably let that rest for a little while.
We want you to come right after. We're like, all right, let's have some new people on. Then we're like, all right, we'll have Donald back on, because like I said, Audible, you have stuff that's actually interesting to talk about. You're coherent. You have your own podcast, so you know what to do. Oh my God, it's great.
I got a microphone.
Exactly. That's 90% of it right there. Anyone listening, if you have a microphone, you could probably come on the podcast. If you don't have a microphone, I will kill you if you try to come on this podcast.
If you try to do the call-in option, Nelson will literally be staring down this camera the entire time we record, like we're holding a gun to him.
I just sleep. If anyone, the only time that's ever worked is when Chris came on and he did the call-in option, and it was just because he had. No, wait, he didn't do the call-in option.
We fixed it in the end, remember?
Yeah. Well, now we got him.
Fine in the end.
We got him a microphone, so he actually got the same microphone that we got you and Tyler, even though Tyler doesn't fucking use it.
Anybody who misses Tyler, subscribe to the Patreon, because he's on our Patreon episodes.
Yes, Tyler is a Patreon reward. He is a 100% a Patreon reward, because he has a family. He has decided to do the right thing.
That sounds so wrong.
I know, right? Oh man. By right thing, I mean lose his damn mind.
It'll do it to you.
Oh man. But yeah, so we're back. We had a great we had a hiatus for the holidays. We left everyone with almost 3-hour long episode of us talking shit about what happened throughout the year, but we're back. We got some new Patreon subscribers. We got the gang's all here. And I've decided to make the worst decision of my life, and that's to get off social media for a month, which fucking sucks.
He says, while I can track his progress from him posting stories, he came off.
That's right. Kai's freezing at the right moment, so you don't know what social media I'm doing.
You're being silenced.
You're being silenced by they.
They know.
They know. No, so you could do Facebook stories from Messenger. So I kept Facebook Messenger so I could talk to people, but I could post stories from there. So I've just been watching The Sopranos for the 4th time all the way through. And then I've replaced I replaced Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook with LinkedIn, my email, Facebook Messenger, and I think that's about it. I just literally go
carrier pigeon.
You got that ham radio.
Yeah, I do have the ham radio. I should get my license now. I should talk to other bald dudes with beards that sit at home.
Well, that's what podcasting was before podcasting.
All ham radio is an unrecorded podcast. Ham radio is live streaming before live stream was a thing. Oh man, but yeah, this is horrible. This sucks. I hate it, and maybe I'll break my addiction like by week 3. I won't have the urge to log on the social. I had to delete the apps. I didn't just sign out. I deleted the apps to make sure I did not get on there. So
how much longer do you have to go?
What is today? Today it's all January, so it's January 9th. So to January 31st? Is it January 30? Count your knuckles. Is this a 30 or 31?
32nd.
What Mark said. We're using the Julian calendar. Oh man, but yeah, so this blows. I'm not gonna lie, it's horrible, but not as bad as our friend of the show, Kevin McCarthy. One. Yeah, Don, you got to talk about what they should have done.
This is just because I enjoy a good political circus. The good folks at PBS missed out on a great opportunity, and they might not have missed out on it. They might set something up with some late night thing. But the wonderful people at PBS, as nonpartisan as they are, need to recognize when there's a circus. And the second day, when it was clear it was going to go into a third day, it's just simply, you know what, let's just call up the people at Sesame Street and send the countdown to do the reporting on this event. Because that's the only thing that makes sense now. You've got a bunch of clowns, let's just throw in some Muppets.
Yeah. Oh my God. 5.
How many times will we be electing Kevin McCarthy?
5 ballots.
15 times. Holy shit. 15 times?
And like puppet Matt Gaetz like just hobbles along. It's like, I'm not
Matt
voting
Gaetz already
for...
looks like a puppet.
He really does. Is that big ass head? He's like, I'm not voting for Kevin McCarthy.
They almost look like the Punch and Judy puppets when that one guy Rogers or whatever it was like tried to go up to like accost Gates.
My God, they had to hold back Representative Mike Rogers from. So there's one Mike Rogers is from Alabama. I don't know if that was him or it was the other Mike Rogers, but like this guy tried to like physically swing on Matt Gaetz, which would have been great. They should have they should let members of the House, actually, they should let members of Congress fight more often. We haven't had a good fight. We haven't had a good fight in Congress since before the Civil War. I think that they should let them fight.
Canes. Everyone gets one at the door.
Yeah, everyone gets one of those canes. What is it? And they just beat the shit. What was it? Don, you said, what was his name?
Charles Sumner was the victim. Preston Brooks was the aggressor.
Yeah, just get them, just a Preston Brooks cane, just caning each other, just beating the shit out of each other on the floor. I would love to see Matt Gaetz get hit with a cane. Just AOC out of nowhere with a baseball bat.
You have to start announcing it like it's wrestling then.
No, just hit
Sunday. If you smell.
Here comes Bernie Sanders with a chair.
Oh my God, look out, JR. My God, he killed him.
My God, he has a family.
As God is my witness, he's broken in half. Starter.
It's just funny to watch a fall of an empire in real time.
I know, right? It's just like, oh man, is this what they felt like in Rome? This is what they like, oh hey, everything's fine. And it's like, oh shit, that's a lot of Germans.
Oh my
man.
gosh.
Yay. But yeah. So 16 times the charm, everyone. If you just remember, if you fail once, just keep trying. Get back on that horse 16 times and you'll get it right.
God, you know what that's gonna do? That's gonna give Trump ideas now. It's like, well, I could run 16 times.
Please
don't.
Please don't ever run again. Oh my god! Someone actually did vote him for speaker. I think it was Matt Gaetz. I think it was Gaetz voted for him for speaker. Oh my god!
Fucking
that was my big fear, because I told a friend of mine about this before the election. I said if the Republicans get the House back, they can nominate anybody to be speaker, because the rules don't stipulate that you have to be a member of Congress or an elected official. It is simply the majority party elects a speaker. So it could be somebody off the street. They could have picked Alex Jones to be the speaker at the House.
Listen here, I got the papers. The Committee for Aliens in 9/11. I want to know what happened.
I got the secret government documents right here. I see right here. This is where they are using the chemicals in the water.
This is where the
hogs came.
The chemicals, the vaccines.
And that's when Sesame Street picks up and Kermit just does that to the camera.
Yeah.
You mean Jordan Peterson?
Please don't.
Did I message you that?
Yeah. Yes. Up yours, moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Woke moralists. Okay, get it right.
Well, what I say? I said woke moralists, right?
Sleepy moralist.
Yes. Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who. He didn't even say whom. He said who. It's like, for someone who's supposed to be smart, use proper English, you dickhead. Oh my god. The young men, they're just crying. For someone who I don't want to, you know what? I'll say it. I don't care. Fuck Jordan Peterson. As someone who touts traditional masculinity, he cries a lot. Just saying. For some guy, it's you need to eat more meat.
We don't have a soundboard, so I just said, I don't know.
If we get a soundboard, the only person who's allowed to be on it is Mark.
Well, those are the guys that run around saying oh, well, guys shouldn't be talking about their feelings, or if you're weak, if you talk about your feelings, you do this. And you're openly weeping about something that isn't actually happening.
It's the stupidest thing. He's cultural Marxism is destroying men. It's shut the fuck up. I was cry about something. Cry about something meaningful. Cry at the end of Titanic. Cry at the end of The Notebook. Cry when your favorite football team loses. Don't cry about this Nazi dog whistle you keep fucking perpetuating.
These globalists. I'm oh, there we go.
And for the record, I do cry. I do cry at the end of The Notebook. Every time I watch, the few times I've watched.
Why don't you throw The Blind Side in there, since you got all those white lady movies?
First off, Mark. The Notebook is very sad. Okay, I cry at the ending. I think it's sad, Mark. So you're not gonna belittle my feelings.
Look, I cried when I went home, and after The Blind Side, I cried for an hour. And then I found out about the lady, and I was pissed off.
No, what happened?
No, she is exactly who you think she is.
Oh no, I figured, but yeah.
It's so Sandra Bullock did a great job, but they did not show how kind of shady the lady is in real life. She took pictures with these black kids in Memphis or wherever they were, outside of Memphis, because her family owns a bunch of fast food places. So she asked to take a picture with the kids and said, oh, the kids were they ate and they hung out for a little bit. And so she's oh, well, I'm going to get you a ride home, and I'm going to do this and do this. And they're no, we're just waiting for my brother to come pick me up. So she took a picture with them, posted the Instagram, and was oh, I gave these guys $20 because they needed a ride, and they did this. And I'm who does this? Who does? And the thing is, the kids like blasted her for it. And they were like, that's not even what happened. We ate our food. She came over, talked to us for a minute, and then took a picture with us. And we explained to her, like, my brother was coming from school, getting done at high school or whatever. These kids were junior high. This brother was high school. So they were just waiting for their brother after school. And she turned it into, oh, look at me, I'm helping poor Black kids. And they're like, that's not even what happened. We had money. We bought our food.
So we all knew she was a white savior. We just didn't know how bad.
Oh yeah. It's, and there were other people that were, in this whole thing that were basically saying like, they're kind of known in, at least within the Black community of Memphis, of like, they're full of shit. Or at least she is, as far as like, it's a great thing that she did, but you can only milk that for so long.
She's riding that wave as long as she can. Oh man. Anyway,
right, Nelson, you want to tell us about that book?
Yeah. So
all right. Hold on. Nelson has decided that before we let our esteemed guest speak, he has to talk about this book, right? That's because Nelson's not allowed on social media, so he can't talk to anybody. So now he has to dump everything that's in his mind on this show. So let's go. Let's talk about this goddamn book.
So thankfully, my dad hasn't figured out how to use technology. So he'll probably never ever listen to this podcast, even though he knows of it. I don't think he can ever find it. But my dad is a revisionist Confederate apologist, right? So he thinks the Confederacy were the good guys. The war was not about slavery and this lost cause mythology, the noble South, blah blah blah. Everyone got along. It was about tariffs and taxes, which doesn't make any fucking sense for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. But he's always believed this, and he's always been like blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever, Dad. But since he's gotten older, he's gotten worse. So he finally, I think, hit pinnacle boomer white guy and sent me this book. And I know we're not a visual thing, but it's called it's a very poorly designed cover. Like the JPEG image that they use does not fit. It looks like if Picasso drew Klansmen, because it looks like all their faces are melting. It doesn't make any sense, but it's a picture of what's supposed to be the Klan, and it says Washington's KKK, the Union League during Southern Reconstruction. So what this means is that people who believe this stuff, like my dad, think that the Union League, which was predominantly a black organization with like white Republicans in the mix, usually from the North that came down South, or the few like Southern Unionists that were still like in the white Southern Unionists that were in the South, to basically they were members of the Republican Party, and they wanted to make sure that they had equal rights, that they were allowed to vote, that they like kept on the legacy of like what Lincoln wanted, and when it comes to voting rights, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, etc. And they formed the Union League, and my dad and people like him believe that they were the bad guys. And everyone can wonder why. And that the Klan were actually the good guys. And the Union League went around, and they were the ones that did the lynchings, and they were the ones that caused the problems. They were the outside agitators. The carpetbagging Yankees came down here and stirred up trouble, and they caused trouble, and the Klan was protecting everyone down here. And this guy, John Chodes, who John Chodes is a distinguished playwright and biographer and a lifelong resident of New York City. Now, I want to emphasize this real quick because my dad saw that he's from New York City, and because a Yankee says this, the Yankee must know that the Union League was bad because they came from up north. The Yankee, he knows, which is ironic as fuck. And apparently, John Chodes became interested in the war between the states and Southern history after studying the U.S. Army's invasion and occupation of his city during the war, which doesn't make any sense because he's a lifelong resident of New York. So when they invade and occupy New York, I'm not gonna read. I read one little section of this, and it's only about, it's like a pamphlet almost. It's like 62 pages long. by Shotwell Publishing, which is from, I guess, Columbia, South Carolina, established 2015. It's two old flintlock pistols and making an X. But the back of it says the official, it's all in caps, right? This part's all in caps. The official, quote unquote, version of Southern Reconstruction is that there was a reign of terror, systemic murder, and intimidation by the quote unquote white Southern ruling class who were determined to keep free people of color with a U in a virtual state of slavery. The real picture is a good deal more complicated. One can find plenty of material about the conflict, intimidation, and the killing in America during the period 1865 to 1877. But here we go. This is the icing on the cake right here. But the Marxist class conflict formula of history, and this is, for some reason, this is literally all one word, no space, also known as political correctness, takes for granted. I can't, there's no space. This is all one word. Also known as political correctness, for some reason, is all one word. It's not spaced out. Takes for granted as fact what it's hard to read. Takes for granted as fact what is clearly partisan propaganda of the time. They never asked the essential factual and moral question: who initiated violence? ? John Chodes shows that the violence was begun by the Republicans through the establishment of the Union League. Yeah, they started the violence. All right. Mm-hmm. The Union League was a northern organization with the mission of maintaining the illegal and undemocratic control of the Republican Party in the South. The mobs of black militia, led by carpetbaggers, engaged in intimidation, theft, harassment of the innocent, and murder. They deliberately provoked violent response. Their coercion was directed not only at whites, but towards the freedom, but towards the free men who refused to support the Republican regime. In other words, the Union League used the methods of the Ku Klux Klan before the Klan came into existence. This book tells the shocking story of this long-forgotten chapter in American history, the story of the Union League, Washington's KKK. None of that makes fucking sense. None of that makes fucking sense.
Well, some of them were certainly words.
They were certainly words. And the one part I did read, because the one I know most about is about fucking Louisiana, right? So the beginning part about Louisiana, yeah, I mean, this is how these right-wing bullshit conspiracies start, right? So there was a dispute, and there was a problem within the Republican Party at the time in Louisiana between two people that wanted to be governor. And then the person who won out was the more radical Republican. And apparently people who liked the other guy tried to team up with the Democrats to get the Democrat elected, but it didn't happen. The radical Republican guy still won. But there was voting irregularities because, just back then it was probably easier to do that. Unlike today, the elections were stolen. Even back then, all the elections were stolen.
It was rigged.
It was rigged.
I don't care what you say. The election was rigged.
It sounded way too much like Trump. I'm not gonna lie.
Way too much practice.
That's our esteemed guest.
Donald Trump's our esteemed guest.
How dare you put those words in my mouth, Mark?
So it starts off with a little tiny sprinkle of truth, and then it gets fucking way out there where the Democrats were the good guys, and they rose up against the corrupt Republican regime that stole the election, and they totally leave out the Colfax massacre with Democratic White League literally massacred 1,000 black voters, right, that tried to fight back against the coup that was led by Confederate officers and Democrats, that the federal government, led by Longstreet of all people, former Confederate general turned Republican, and it turned Republican, who then had to lead the army in to crush this literal coup that the Democrats are trying to do against the elected government of Louisiana, where a federal judge actually said, no, the Republican guy won. Right. This is bullshit. So yeah, that's this book. I'm not going to read it. I'm probably going to burn it. But I want to say probably the funniest thing is that it reads like he'll have Mississippi, and then he'll have a month and a year, and then a paragraph of what happened, and like another year and like a few sentences and another year and a few sentences. Excuse me. It's not a like coherent book. It's broken up. It's so poorly written. It's oh my God, this is so fucking stupid. It is so dumb. It is just not. It's I hate it. And I took him out to dinner for his birthday. Luckily, he did not bring this in the restaurant. If he would have brought this book in the restaurant, I would have left. Because I'm just like, Dad, read the fucking room. Literally read the room. Most of the people in this restaurant right now are black. I'm not going to be seeing this fucking book. And he gave it to me afterwards. Thankfully, he had some sense. But I thumbed through it and I'm like, I'm probably gonna burn it. My mom wants me to burn it, and she was like, get rid of it. I was like, yeah, I am, but I wanted to laugh at it first and then get rid of it. But yeah, so Donald, last time he came on, he talked about the narrative and historical narratives. Well, I have a new narrative for you, and it's that the Union League came and were doing things before the Klan, and the Klan were good, and the Union League was bad, and no problems ever existed in the South. And it was all them damn Yankees.
That's all right, because William Dunning and the Daughters of Confederacy are going to sue you for copyright infringement with that statement you just made.
What? I'm a proud Southern man who does not believe in this in the Yankee way. The war of Northern aggression.
Exactly. Oh my God.
My dad calls it that. He calls it the war of Northern aggression, but he also calls it the Second American Revolution, brother. I was like, shut up. I asked my mom, oh no, I'm talking about that in After Dark. I talk about how my mom had a shy going.
Yeah, that is an After Dark story.
Dark. If you want to hear about how my mom literally
ran a racket.
She
worked. The statute of limitations is pretty
sure. My mom wanted to make clear I didn't sell any, but how my
allegedly
how my Italian mother, first generation Italian mother, had a literal shy going at the makeup store she worked at. But that's for an After Dark episode. But I actually asked her, I was like, Mom, you could tell me if Dad's not my actual father, right? Because she was married before she met my dad, and she got mad. She was like, how dare you?
Now think of what you just accused your mom of.
I know, that's exactly what she said. She was like, I was like, Mom, and I used like her first husband's name. Was like, if I'm taller than Dad, like, he was the first husband was Irish, like, I have a red beard, like, am I his kid? Was it like a thing? She's like, no, it's your father. It's like, damn it, because we have just total complete opposite views of the world, and it's just like, fucking
I wish that was true, because your strong opinion on Irish people.
I know, right? When Ireland sends its people, it's not sending its best.
This has absolutely no bearing on the future episode we're hoping to do.
Oh yeah,
with some Irish
I'm
comrades.
gonna be fucking surrounded on all sides. I got Native Americans on one side, I got the Irish on the other, I'm the Italian in the middle, and I'm fucked.
The Italian in the middle. That is the title of your autobiography. You already have marks for your autobiography.
Italian in the middle, the story of the gabagool. Oh man. Oh my God. Anyway, so Don, with that narrative set, that obviously this book is true. Do you want to tell us about? Do you want to talk about what you want to talk about today as an actual historian?
Oh man.
As someone who's not a playwright / biographer and actually has multiple degrees in history.
Whenever I see stuff like that, which is quite often, because I've lived the majority of my life in the South and in places that still think they're the South, like when I lived in Arizona for like 12 years, it was affectionately known as Mississippi of the Southwest for a good period of time. And when I researched the origin of it, I'm like, holy shit, no one's doing research on this. No one's working on this. All right, let me go ahead and carve out my space. Because what I saw from not necessarily books like that, but books like that, whether it's I'm trying to look at my bookshelf right now, but just the narrative that was out there that was pushing, things like the happy slave narrative, or a more recent one, the Irish slave myth. And the way that blew up just because of shouldn't say social media, because of the internet. It was one of those famous early internet hoaxes that was out there, like the spiders that you eat. What was it, 20 spiders, and the average person eats 20 spiders in their
Over
sleep.
your lifetime.
You eat 20
no, like in a year. Like in a year.
You eat 20 spiders at night during the year, and the Irish were slaves too,
Yeah. And so when I first found out about the spider thing, the guy who created it, he was like, I wanted to see how quickly what I put on the internet became accepted as fact, accepted knowledge with with American society. But he's like, it just became this thing that people believe. And he's like, I made it up. I completely made it up. And while we're on this, the chupacabra is made up as well. That is not a mythical Mexican creature. I found out from my wife that it was a political tactic by PRI back in the 80s or the 90s, or early 90s. They came up with this as a way to distract people from some of the corruption that was going on in the government. So they came up with, we're going to pretend like there's this crazy beast that's running around. We're going to call it chupacabra. So the chupacabra was not even a thing that was talked about until the 80s or early 90s, and it was just as a distraction from politics. But the whole narrative when it comes to the lost cause is a distraction from teaching people what really happened, teaching people about the real existence of enslaved people, the circumstances that they faced, the reality that at the end of the war, slaveholders were compensated for. That's right. You said we're not visual, so I'm holding up finger quotes, compensating slaveholders for their quote unquote property, as opposed to recognizing these human beings as human beings. So the government paid millions of dollars in lost quote unquote property to slaveholders. But when it comes time for reparations to even be discussed in 10, 20 years later, and now we're looking at 150 plus years later, actually we're approaching 170. I can't do math. Yeah, we're approaching 160 in 2 years. So we're still having this discussion about this, and the reason why we can't have much movement with even teaching the history of slavery itself, or having a ridiculous reaction to things like the 1619 Project, is all goes back to this narrative that was created by William Dunning, who was a historian, but took kind of the same direction that individual was taking with the book that you were referencing, which was, actually it was the North. They were the ones who were wrong. Well, the South, they were on this noble cause. They were trying to fight a war they knew they were going to lose, but they felt as though they were fighting it for the right reasons. People adopted his perspective within the field of history for about 50 years before it was just kind of like, this is complete bullshit. This is not, to the point where you had Woodrow Wilson in the White House endorsing things like Birth of a Nation and the Klan. In fact, I had a document that one of the justices, who was a Confederate veteran. He was a Confederate veteran. He was viewing the film in the White House and told Woodrow Wilson himself, he's like, that's not what happened. A Confederate veteran, who's now a federal judge, is telling you this movie's bullshit. That's not what actually happened.
Literal primary source is like, hey man, this shit's fucking bullshit. You know that, right?
This is not what it is. And so he was one of the individuals who determined that when the film was being released, you can ban this movie. Movies can be part of, you can determine at the city, the county, and even the state level, as well as the federal level for that matter, that you can ban movies from being presented if they are presenting images or messages that are going to, I guess, impact the dialogue in a very negative way or lead to a lot of violence. And that was one of the things that it enthralled me about discovering some of the stuff that I was looking at with Phoenix, because when I first moved to Phoenix back in, I should say Arizona, when I first moved to Arizona in March of 2007, actually, I take that back. Before I even moved there, I was dating a girl who I ended up marrying, and then divorcing a few years later. Best decision of my life. If you ever meet somebody who's gone through a divorce or is recently divorced, first thing you should say to them is congratulations. That is it, because no one gets divorced when they have a happy and healthy marriage. So anyway, you see why I'm careful with my TikToks, because I'm like, I don't want that individual anywhere around. But when I first visited Arizona, I jokingly asked her, I'm like, where are the Black people here? And when it was pointed out, my second question was then, why did Black people come to Arizona? Like, I came here because the military, I mean, I'm dating you, but the military is bringing me out here later on. And as I was there, it was those same questions that were coming up. And a lot of the history had either been erased, I mean, physically had been destroyed, because you had a good number of housing, businesses, and even gathering places that had been destroyed in the name of improvement. So if you look up even some of the old addresses that are on in things like the Green Book for Negro Travelers, which was a guide for Black people to travel nationwide, actually internationally, but nationwide primarily, as far as where they could go, where they could be safe. Some of the addresses that are listed in that book from the 1930s through the early 1960s, only 2 of those places still exist. But the addresses that are included, you can map them out and you can see what's on top of them. 2 of the former sites, I think it was a hotel, which not a hotel by today's standards, but basically somebody's house. They had extra rooms, or they had more housing on their property. One of those is was where the current baseball stadium is, Chase Field. And you can plug in that address, it'll pull it right up to, I think it's the bleacher section. I mean, the outfield bleacher section is where the house would have been. But you have the Elks Lodge, you have the Swindle Tourist Home, and you have, I think, Mrs. White's Golden Rule was one of those restaurants that was listed. Those 3 places are the only ones that still exist. But when I was trying to investigate this, my question became, you have push-pull factors that are always going to make people move from one place to another, leave where they are to find some new home. And when I was digging, I kept finding like dead ends here and there. And I questioned, I'm looking up the right thing. And I found this property survey that the city of Phoenix did back in the 90s. And it listed where Black people live, Black businesses, things like this in the Phoenix area, starting around 1900. And I think it went until like 1990, or maybe have gone to 2000. And in looking at all that stuff, I started to realize what was happening. You had a Black community or Black migrants, where at the turn of the century in 1900, you had 150 in the city of Phoenix, 700 statewide total. And out of those 150, they were all pushed into one area in South and Eastern Phoenix. And it was farmland. It was places that were, there's gambling, there was brothels, there was all this. It was where the respectable white people did not want to be. So, we'll let the poor white folks live down there. Black people move in, really not worried about them because they're not coming to where we live. There's a population of about, there's a good sized Chinese population statewide, about 800 people from China, originally from China, as far as like these are first generation in America. Mm-hmm. and primarily men who had come for the railroad and stayed because now they can't go back. They stay and they work in mining. And you had a few, I think it was less than 100 that lived in the Phoenix area, and they kind of stayed with the Black community. The indigenous community, of course, was basically pushed away outside of Phoenix unless you were being brought into in the residential schools, into the what was, well, I guess the industrial school, whatever they called it. They were being taught, one, how not to be quote unquote Indian, to pull the language from the documents. So it's going to cost us less money. It'll cost us less money to educate you than it would to kill you, is what one of the quotes was in the newspaper. I'm sorry, one of the documents. So we will take these children away from their families, put them into these schools, and then we will basically create conscripted labor out of that. So we're going to train them. We're going to teach them English, get them to dress like us, get them to believe like us, destroy their culture, destroy their way of life, destroy their family structures. But we're going to make them into productive workers as the city continues to industrialize. So you've got indigenous folks that are marginalized and then re-marginalized within the city. You have a growing Black population of about 150 in 1900. And then you have this contentious point when it comes to race with respect to Mexican Americans. If you were white passing, they left you alone. You were considered white to an extent. So there were no laws against Mexican Americans. There were no barriers to things like education, employment, anything like that, because the idea was similar to what it was with the indigenous population. We're going to take you and turn you into us. We're going to make you English-speaking Protestants, preferably, at least with the population that's there. We're going to make you Baptist, we're going to make you Episcopalian or Mormon. So we're going to take care of you. But the ones that look different, we can't do anything with them, whether we're talking about the Chinese immigrants or Chinese Americans that are here, or the Black migrants that have just moved here. So as I was going through a lot of this, I was questioning, like, what was it like for them? From the very first day, from the very first few years before statehood, the plan was already being laid out. It was, we can't stop Black people from coming here, but we can make it problematic for them to be here. So in 1909, in the spring of 1909, the territory of Arizona, because one of the reasons why it's a territory for roughly 50 years is because there weren't enough white people. So California, you see, it pushes for statehood very quickly because so many white people went to California for the gold rush. But when it came to Arizona, very few white people were moving to Arizona. When it came to labor, you're dealing with a Mexican American population, Mexican Americans who have been patriated as Americans or given citizenship as a result of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1948, and the same treaty that gives us California, but they get citizenship. The indigenous population does not get citizenship. The Black population is non-existent there up until about 1887. There are no recorded Black people in the Phoenix area and even in some of the rural areas. But the idea is to control them. So in the spring of 1909, now that you've got 150 people, and now by 1910, we're looking at a few hundred. We've got a small population here. We're growing. We've got schools. These people have kids now. We'll segregate the schools based off of race. Indigenous population, they're already going to their schools. Mexican, as far as Mexican Americans, they're going to go to school with people that we already recognize as white. So they're going to go to school with them, learn English, if English isn't being spoken at home, but they're going to learn English. We're going to make them American. We're going to go ahead and convert them in so many different ways to get them assimilated. But the Black population, we can see visually the differences between us and them. We do not want them near our kids. And this goes to another law that had been passed previously, and this had to deal with miscegenation. intermarrying was illegal in Arizona until about 1962. But the provisions that were drawn up initially addressed indigenous, Chinese, and white. So those three groups could not mix. They changed the language in the beginning of the 20th century to state anyone who is white or a descendant of a white person cannot marry an indigenous, and of course they use different words, indigenous folks, Mexican folks, black folks, and they define them as Mongolian. So they didn't just say Chinese. It was anybody who the definition that was given was Mongolian. So anyone who fit in those groups, you could not intermarry. So the fear is if these people come here, if black men come here, they won't be able to legally mix with white women or marry. They can live together because there were cohabitation laws that were pretty loose, but you cannot marry and have children. And if you do get married, your marriage is null and void. And then your child is basically screwed because even according to those legal statutes, your child can't marry anybody because no one with any of these, mixed blood is supposed to mix. So they have all these weird things that they're coming up with. Now, they finally get a majority white population because by 1910, it was just 48%. But they get a majority white population. They file with Congress. They achieve statehood. They're granted statehood on February 14th, 1912. And here's the messed up part that I'm guessing Howard Taft didn't realize that he did. He gave them statehood on the 50th anniversary of when the Confederacy claimed Arizona as its territory.
He was stuck in the bathtub when that happened.
Yeah. No, this was after he got the new one. So I started looking at all these documents and questioning, like, how did they deal with this? And what I found was phenomenal in some of the interviews. The reasoning why you had a black population that, despite the numbers, despite being so small, because you had about 150 black people to about 4,500 white people. And the number, let me pull it up real quick so I can give you an exact number for 1910. But when you're looking at this, there's my chart. Yeah, by 1910, 1900, you got 5,500 white people. 5,000 roughly white people, 150 black people. You have a total population in 1910. This is just Phoenix, not the state, but for Phoenix is just over 11,000. The total black population in Phoenix is 328. So the population for both basically doubled. And as the population hits that number, the understanding is they're going to keep coming. We're not going to be able to stop them from coming here, but we need to come up with ways to dissuade them or discourage them from, being in the public space. So we're going to limit where they can go to school, types of jobs, where you can live. So if you're south of Van Buren, that is basically where all black people live. If you're north of Van Buren, that is where all the white businesses and white homes are. And you would even have developers that were coming in as early as 1900 and were developing racially restrictive neighborhoods. And it expands in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s. And even in the 50s and 60s, you start having these really exclusive all-white communities until the Fair Housing Act takes place in the latter part of the 1960s. And even the letters that I went through from people in the 60s who were opposed to the Fair Housing Act, they were so angry. And it was all driven by the John Birch Society because all the letters are basically the same. It's, "Hi, my name is Doug. I'm a red-blooded American who believes in freedom, blah, 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 blah." So it's the same thing. And then it's, "I want you to oppose, Senator Goldwater, I want you to oppose the Fair Housing Act because I shouldn't have to sell my house to anybody I don't want to sell my house to." And I'm sitting here thinking, like, John Birch, which is now, the basically everything the Koch brothers have funded, they have convinced people that That's what the law states. The law stated you can't discriminate against somebody. Doesn't mean you still have to sell it to them. It just means that I can't tell you this house is for sale, and then you show up and you're a different race than I thought, and I immediately tell you, hey, I just sold the house yesterday. Sorry, we just rented the apartment yesterday. But it's this long trip that Arizona takes to get back on task here. It's this long trip that Arizona takes, delving into race, delving into even sexuality, from 1900 to about 1980. I should even say even further, because they don't have MLK's birthday recognized through the 80s. But it takes this long trip where Arizona is arguing, or Phoenix is arguing, that they are, quote unquote, a northern city, to make this statement that we don't lynch Black people here, we don't stop you from voting, we don't do any of these things that you would see in Alabama or in Mississippi or in Georgia or Louisiana. We don't do anything like that. So what you have is the Black community is directly confronting that narrative and saying, city fathers on the city council, businessmen, the mayor, even at the state level, are saying Phoenix is the ideal city. It is the place that you want to be. It's the state of the city of the future. It is a northern city. If you're a northern city, then you need to act like it. Trying to draw this comparison between the North is good, the South is bad. You don't want to be these guys. You're saying you want to be Northern. You want to be recognized as Northern city, but you are recreating and retransplanting Jim Crow into Phoenix, Arizona, with all these restrictive laws. So in 1915, when to jump ahead, because there's some court cases that fight against school segregation, they lose off of stupid technicalities, because Samuel Bayless hires the former governor, and the governor at the time, who would not sign the racially restrictive segregation policies for the schools, said, I'm not going to sign it because we don't need to build new schools for Black people. These kids can go to school together. It's a waste of money. So it wasn't this moral cause for him, as far as I believe Black and white should be together. His argument was, this is going to cost us too much money, so let's not do it. And then he goes into private practice after he's done being the territorial governor. The Black power brokers, Samuel Bayless, William Crump, Marshall Shelton, the churches, they go to him. They're like, hey, you agreed with us that we didn't need to have a segregated school. We want you to be our attorney when we sue the school district. They sue, and they sue roughly after it gets passed. And the ruling is not that the state and the city can't discriminate, can't create segregated schools. The judge rules and agrees with one of the points that Samuel Bayless, his kids, one of the arguments that Samuel Bayless makes about his children. They have to cross railroad tracks. It is going to be dangerous for them to cross the tracks to go to school. The judge agrees with that and says, yes, that is an undue burden, that they're going to have to deal with the danger of these railroad tracks. So in the appeal, the attorneys for the school district just go straight for that attack. And roughly a year later, when they're going through this appeal, they start pushing the idea that, hey, all kids have dangers when they're walking to school. All kids have dangers. In fact, there are some white kids who have to cross those railroad tracks. Now, mind you, these were the poor white kids who had to live south of that area because their family didn't have enough money to live north of Van Buren. But they're saying, we have white kids that have to cross those train tracks. In fact, it's really not the school district's responsibility. If this parent really cared about his children, he would buy a house closer to the school so the child wouldn't have to walk as far. Plus, there's this new thing called the automobile. Trains, they have warning systems, they have bells, they have whistles, they have steam, they have a train conductor. But we have these new cars coming to Phoenix, and tell you what, not everybody's trained in how to drive a car. Now, the judge ruled in their favor and saying, yeah, you kind of proved your point. Yeah, it's going to be dangerous no matter what. So boom, case thrown out. So that's one of the first pushbacks that the Black community has against the city and even the state of Arizona, by making the argument that we want to be here. We want to be part of the city. We don't want to be segregated or separated from the city. We want to be part of its growth, part of its identity. And they never back down from anything, which was remarkable, because I'm reading through this stuff and I'm seeing it as someone who was raised in the South and studied primarily up to this point African-American history from the Southern perspective, as far as with the civil rights movement. So you're thinking like, well, shit, who got killed? Who got lynched? Whose house got firebombed? And I'm reading through it all. And I'm like, I don't know. Nothing happened to them. Nothing happened to anybody other than a shoe shine boy in the 1920s held a white woman's hand as she was getting off an elevator. Like, just basically, ma'am, let me help you. And because he touched her, a Klansman who happened to be in the lobby of this hotel, lobby of this building, saw it. They kidnapped him and just beat him up. And I shouldn't say just beat him up, but I mean, compared to other measures they could have taken.
Yeah.
But they beat him up.
Compared to like Emmett Till, like what happened to him.
Right.
Yeah.
They beat him. They took him to the desert, which isn't a far drive in Phoenix. They took him out in the desert, beat him up, told him to keep his hands off of white women, and then just left him there. The other person, which this is funny because it shows you who the city of Phoenix cared about. They beat up a Mormon one time, the Klansman. They beat up this one Mormon who I think it was a principal of one of the schools. They beat him up, and then immediately the city of Phoenix was like, we're banning any Klan activity. That we cannot have this. We gotta make sure none of this is gonna happen in our town. I'm like, you just had a shoe shine boy get the hell beaten out of him, and meanwhile you're upset because this one guy, they've been doing stuff like this. But anyway, the next big challenge that came was in 1915, I should say 1960, but 1915 with the release of Birth of a Nation. It was getting a lot of backlash, and people, hopefully nobody who's listening to the show, but everybody who listens to the show can understand, but they would not have this perspective. But they can understand what I'm going to mention, which is we all get tired of hearing people around us or on social media or whatever say like, people are too sensitive these days. People, if this movie had come out now, it would have been canceled. Or you can't release a movie like this now. You couldn't release a movie like Birth of a Nation in 1915 because there were protests throughout the nation. I think the state of Kansas banned it from showing, despite the president, the president of the United States showing it at the White House, having a private screening with Klansmen, whether people want to admit it or not. There were Klansmen in that group. There were riots in Philadelphia, Chicago, Atlanta, and I think Memphis over the showing of the film, and might have been in DC as well. But there were riots over the film because there were white people who were opposed to it. There were black people who were opposed to it. But then you also had a good number of white people who were not aware of the situation. This is the danger when it comes to something like the lost cause narrative, because you have somebody who may not be well versed on the topic, and they fall right into the propaganda and say like, well, you know what, this is a good perspective. I can understand this. So in 1916, a year after the film's release, it's finally going to get to Phoenix. The city of Phoenix has emergency meetings. I guess the equivalent to emergency meetings now, but they have meetings that are specifically about the film. Should we allow the film in this town? So they decide, the city council decides, along with the mayor decides, they have a council or committee that's set up that determines what can be seen in the movie if it's going to be aired in Phoenix. If it is going to be released at any movie theater, it's either going to be edited or it's going to be, the full film. So the producers the production team who brought the film to Phoenix were saying like, if you're going to edit it, don't bother showing it. So initially they had the film unedited, and I think it lasted maybe 6 weeks because the Black community was out in full force. They were writing letters. They had white allies that were standing up for them. They had people in the city government that were speaking, or I'm sorry, at the city hall meetings that were speaking up and stating like, we don't need to have this movie shown here because what has happened from the movie being shown in places like New Jersey, Maryland, the Carolinas, it started an uptick in violence. And William Crump, who was a businessman and a political leader, black political leader, and I mean political leader in the sense of, if you want to be elected mayor and you need, you got 49% of white folks or 50-50 white folks as far as the percentages, but because black people were allowed to vote, you want to get somebody to tip that scale for you, you need to come talk to me. So he was a power broker in that sense. He was a political figure because he was able to sway elections. So in 1916, great timing, it is a mayoral election year. The current mayor, Young, drops the ball. He allows the movie to be played. He doesn't say, like, I'm opposed to this movie, and I don't want it shown, but it's outside of my authority. The city council voted to show it. He's kind of like, you know what? We should allow it to be shown. We shouldn't have it edited, blah, blah, blah. So William Crump writes a letter to the newspaper. Now, mind you, there are no black newspapers at this point. He has to write to the state newspaper, which is the Arizona Republican. In writing his letter, he basically calls out the mayor and says, yeah, we'll just go with somebody else since you can't stand up for us. I'm thinking of this guy, Korpstein. He sounds like a pretty good candidate because it sounds like he's got our best interest in mind. And says, I have 98% of the black support in this town. Good luck. Paraphrasing. Young loses that election because the film comes out in March. The election is in April. By that time, Young, he knew the black community was in the midst of a backlash against him. So because communication is slow, because newspapers take a little bit longer than they would take now, by the time William Crump has written his letter, Young has already taken his stance. But Crump is kind of like, it's too late. It's honestly too late. Young had actually vouched to have the movie edited. And by having the movie edited, it could no longer be shown within the city limits of Phoenix. So now that he's made this decision, it's a moot point. He's going to lose the election because the black community has already come together and said, we're voting for Korpstein. We're voting for this other guy because you weren't willing to listen to us. And because the movie has been edited, the production company refuses to show it in Phoenix and they move it east to Mesa. So the newspaper ads are hilarious. Come to Mesa, see the unedited version of this cinematic marvel. And then you see like the Lions or the Elks Theater. We're sorry to inform you, but if you bought tickets to see the Birth of a Nation, we'll be giving refunds on this date from this time to this time. We're not allowed to show it anymore. And I'm just reading through all this, just laughing at all the historical context, everything that's going on, and the fact that these men and women that were organizing were able to pull this off when you couldn't get this in other areas where there was a significant black population. So William Crump, in an interview years later, said the reason why they were able to get so much stuff done was because the quote unquote, the die had not been cast. So they're not coming into a situation where there's already a level of racial animosity as far as white, black. There's not that dichotomy already, as opposed to where you have Alabama or Georgia or South Carolina, where you got that long history of a struggle. We're coming in and we're basically starting from scratch. You're trying to get ahead of us with this legislation by preventing us from living in certain places, or preventing us from going to school, or preventing us from intermarrying, or holding back certain jobs. But we will be able to figure out a way to navigate this situation, because as black people come to this city, they're going to come to the same churches that we're going to, because they're only going to be allowed to live in a certain area of Phoenix. So they're going to go to the same churches. You're going to frequent the same businesses. We're going to work together. We're going to work in your houses and in your businesses as well. So we'll be able to become power brokers and part of this this city's identity as it grows. Which again is funny to think about how progressive Phoenix tries to be at the beginning of the 20th century, and then kind of where it ends at the end of the 20th century, where you look at Phoenix and you're like, or Arizona itself, Phoenix not so much, but you look at Arizona and you're like, I don't get it. How can you, I don't get it. Like, you're one border away from New Mexico, which is really chill. You're really cool. You share a border with California, which is even more chill. What the hell's going on here? And what it ended up being, to end it on this point, what it ended up being was people were coming in as snowbirds in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and they were just increasing the presence of people from the South, white Southerners, white people from the Midwest. And then what they were doing is they were just continuing on, or at least expanding, the discriminatory policies that Arizona had in place. And because they're now buying up property, they're buying up spaces, they're then driving up the price of housing. So a lot of the people that were living in South Phoenix and East Phoenix at that time, as they're able to afford to move out, one, they can't because you have restrictive racial covenants. And then two, now housing has surpassed what they had planned on, the previous 5, 10, 15 years. Hell, even public housing was segregated up until like the 80s. So you had a white housing project, a black housing project, and a Latina housing project, which the Coleman, what's her first name? Dottie Coleman? Vernell Coleman. She organized a interracial rent strike. So she got in with the white members of the housing, or white residents of housing, as well as the Latina residents of public housing, and all basically said, like, we're not paying any rent for public housing until this stuff gets fixed. And it created this massive movement between people of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different races, that led to social progress in that area. But yeah, I've got a lot of stuff I gotta that's gonna be in this, and my goal is to piss off a lot of people in Phoenix when they read it. One, either it's I'm mad because I didn't know this, or two, I'm mad because how dare you say Phoenix is race or Arizona is racist? I'm like, have you not seen yourselves?
Yeah.
Did you not see the last election? Oh, shit. I guess some people, the election is still going on. Kerry Lake.
I think one thing that was crazy, having taken Southern politics classes, is when we get to the Voting Rights Act, and you see like where typically you would expect the states to fall into Article 5, which basically, for people who don't know, the Department of Justice or the Circuit Court of DC had to say, like, all right, had to approve of the changes you would make to your laws about voting to make sure they weren't racist, because it historically disenfranchised black voters. They fell into Article 5 of the Voting Rights Act. But then you expand it, like, obviously it's the South, and everyone's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But then, like, you start looking at other places, like there's certain counties in certain places, and then you look at Arizona, and Arizona as a state fell into Article 5 because of how discriminatory it was against marginalized, not just black, but also Mexican and indigenous voters. And there was a thing that was, I think the reason was they refused for a long time to offer ballots in English. In other languages besides English.
Right.
That they were like, all right, well, you're falling into this. And then a lot of people forget how fucking racist Barry Goldwater was. Like, the dude, when he ran for president, I think I mentioned this in other episodes, but when he ran for president against Lyndon Johnson in 1964, his like main thing was like, yo, this Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act, they're communism, they're bad.
Right.
We need states' rights. And Barry Goldwater, as a Republican, was the first Republican since Reconstruction to win the Deep South. He won Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. And when he came to Montgomery, they like had a huge parade for him. He was in Crampton Bowl, which is the big football stadium in town. And he was like, they just loved him because they were like, Johnson's a traitor, and this Barry Goldwater guy, he's the right idea. He's gonna keep our schools segregated and protect us with states' rights. That's when it really starts shifting to the whole states' rights thing. But yeah, it's something that we've talked about on the podcast a number of times, that like, while the South, we all know as Southerners, the South has its problems, and we talk about them a lot. But then I think what drives all of us crazy, and then like a lot of our listeners crazy, is like when you hear people from outside the South be like, oh yeah, those Southerners in the South are so bad. I'm just like, ever looked at what happened in Boston like in the 70s?
Yeah, I was gonna say the Boston busing. That's my go-to. I'm like, do you know what they did?
Yeah, you know who it was? Is those shanty Irish.
God, here we go again.
Well, it was Whitey Bulger. Let's be
fair. He's a snitch. But yeah, it's just like, look at Chicago. Like they tried to kill Martin Luther King when he went up there. They hit him with a brick. Like he got hit in the head with a brick in Chicago, and then Boston and New York, and just like all these other places. But I think people like, even I had forgotten, like completely just kind of overlooked the Southwest as being like, it's just kind of there.
Yeah.
And it didn't really get into like, you don't really think of that as being like a Jim Crow type area until you really start digging into it. And we mentioned before we started recording, one of the things that I found interesting was the Los Angeles Police Department, Los Angeles Sheriff Department was actively recruiting Southern good old boys and former police and sheriffs, deputies and sheriffs from the South to come out to Los Angeles. And after the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act passed, they're like, oh, when Jim Crow, quote unquote, fell in the South, they're like, oh, you can't do what you were doing in the South anymore. Come on out to Los Angeles. You can continue it here. And that was just wild. I don't think people, and now today you see like the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, like just infested with white supremacist gangs. And everyone knows the problems with the LAPD. But it's just, when you talk about the snowbirds and you talk about people leaving, white people leaving the South and coming to Arizona and coming to these places. And people don't realize that, like, especially like inland California, the farther away you get from the coast, like in the Bakersfield, and they get into like inland California, it's all Trump country. Like it's all racist, conservative jackasses. And it's just, and we all talked about Oregon and whatnot, and how Oregon was found as a white supremacist state. I love it because we are an anti-Pacific Northwest podcast.
Don't bring them here, and don't come here.
And yet we still have listeners in the Pacific Northwest, even though we're an anti-Pacific Northwest podcast. It's the Southern diaspora. The young
don't
ones.
kink shame them, Nelson. They're obviously into it in a different way. To have on the usual 3 Southerners go fuck you, and they're still here.
Yeah, Portland, you jackasses. You think you're so cool with your mail-in voting and your hip ways. Fuck you.
Well, I mean, they make people pump their own gas now. So.
Yeah, you fucking losers.
They used to just pump it for you. Now you got to pump your own.
Yeah, welcome to the real world.
With the thing with Goldwater, you just reminded me. Goldwater played both sides, and a lot of people don't know how much he did. So there was oh gosh, now of course I forget his name. I have to look at my board now.
He's one of the people that convinced Nixon to resign too. People don't really realize that. Like when Republicans kind of had a backbone back then, they were like, you're gonna get impeached, buddy. You gotta go. And he's like, oh, I didn't do it.
Well, Eleanor Ragsdale and her husband, and this was one of the things I wanted to focus more in on with the dissertation, was talking about the role that women played, because some of the stuff I found that had been published talked about the men. But Eleanor Ragsdale, and I think her husband's name was William, they had moved out of South Phoenix and broke again, they are close. They broke the color barrier, right? They found a backwards way to buy a house in a white neighborhood, which was a very common one. It's like, hey, we have a white friend who's going to buy it. The white friend will sell it to us, which they did a couple of times. Mm-hmm. The second time they did it, they moved to an even more exclusive. And this was one of the funny things about the way that realtors worked in Arizona. When they talked about exclusive, they meant whiter. It was not like, oh, this is such what they meant, whiter and more money. So it's a really good neighborhood. It's just white, white working class, maybe white middle class. But when they start talking about this is a very exclusive community, it meant whiter with more money.
So
they
started weeding out like no Irish, no Italians, no Catholics. It was just
the Catholic. Oh,
whoa! It was just certain white people from certain parts of the United Kingdom were allowed to live. Protestants whose family came from certain parts of the UK were allowed to live in these neighborhoods.
We're going to do a blood quantum test on you to determine how white you are. I
think you're discounting some of the Scandinavian countries, Nelson. There's them too.
The Vikings can live here too. I'm sorry.
Well, actually, didn't Benjamin Franklin say like the Scandinavian countries didn't even count as white?
He might have.
He was
fucking wild.
He was riddled.
It was like British, and that was it.
Yeah, he was
British
riddled with syphilis too. So I'm not gonna. Those later
I know
years,
he didn't like Germans.
That was the time period, like when Americans like to think of like founding fathers and they fought against the British. No, they all fucking loved the British.
Yeah,
they had such a weird like hard on for the British, even though they were like, we don't want to deal with the taxes, but y'all are okay. It was like socially it's okay.
Yeah. So we lose you, we lose ourselves. But
Ben Franklin really did love the French, though. We all know how much he really loved the French.
Yeah, they
oui. I love real quick. I found this out. I love how it was like Ben Franklin. I think it was like John Adams or someone goes over to France and like Adams learns French by like reading poetry and like classical stuff and all this stuff. And Franklin learns it by going to French brothels. And he would go out at night and get drunk and go to brothels and call it his French lessons. Like that's what I love of people like think the founding fathers like these like pure like, besides the fact they were like genocide, they were just genocidal like rapist fucking slave owners, that they think they were like these intellectual men who like drank tea and thought no, they were a bunch of fucking drunks who fucked anything with a pulse. Like they were horrible people. You couldn't drink the water, give you dysentery. So this is getting fucking drunk right in this shitty constitution. Be like, hey, fuck, and just like fighting each other. They're a bunch of fucking dudes they're frat boys. That's what they were.
Yes,
they were frat boys.
I pointed out to my undergrad a few years. I might have done this when I was in high school, which explains a lot. I told them, I said, America was born at a bar. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, the Sons of Liberty. They were drinking together. And said Samuel Adams, he owned a pub, he did this. You mean the guy who owns beer? I was like, it's a different thing because they just commercialized Samuel Adams with that whole beer thing. So, but America started, I mean, if you had cocaine, I would have said it was a cocaine fever dream. But America started as a drunken idea, like, hey, it'd be a good idea.
Fuck British, but I mean they're cool, but
3% tax. Fuck these guys.
We should be able. Well, some of us should be able to vote.
All men are created equal. Not you, George. Not so fast.
Wink, wink, and nudge, nudge.
But the Ragsdales, when they moved into their second home, they had become so popular with the black and white community, like they knew everybody and everybody knew them. So as they were working with NAACP to promote fair housing and get rid of housing discrimination, one of the people that was a guest was Barry Goldwater because of who he was. And not the NAACP invited him, but he knew Ragsdale, and he's like, yeah, I'll come over and see what you guys were talking about. Ragsdale gave them, I think it was either $500 and then over a course of time, like $5,000 cash, with the explicit instructions, you don't tell anybody I gave it to you, because he was running against it. So he's like, here's some money to promote this idea that you guys like, that you want, but don't tell anybody I gave you the money. So William Ragsdale like joked, and I was reading the transcript in the interview, and he's like, I can talk about this now. He's dead. He gave us $500 one time, and he gave us like a $5,000, for the course of a few years to promote these policies or to help us with whatever. So I can't really talk badly about him. And I'm thinking to myself, like, talk badly about him. He was playing both sides as far as like he was trying to get you to promote this, so he had a talking point when it came to running. He didn't care if it was the right thing to do. He didn't care that it was fair, that you should have gotten rid of, these portions of your housing statement or even the bill of sale that stipulated that you could not sell or lease to undesirables, and then listing what those undesirables were. But the Ragsdales, that second home that they got it for a really good deal, and they partially got it because they wanted to piss off the neighborhood. The woman who was living in the house previous to them was a Jewish single mother. I think she was a widow or she had been divorced. I can't remember I read it a while ago, but she was a Jewish single mother. And she said that she was being harassed for being Jewish. And I can imagine the conversation going like this, I'm reaching out for help. They don't like me. I'm Jewish, blah, blah, blah. And I could imagine like Eleanor walking in like, they don't like you because you're Jewish, huh? Wait till we move in. We'll give you what you want for the house, but we're gonna have fun with this. But yeah, they knew so many people in town. Like they arranged for Dr. King to come to ASU to give a speech in support of the Fair Housing Act. And when they had their 20th wedding anniversary, they held their 20th wedding anniversary on their front lawn to let people know that they were, because she was white passing, to let people know that they were a married couple and they were both Black. So they invited like members of Black fraternities and sororities to come out. They had, I think the lieutenant governor or the governor came to their house to like wish them well. So they had a good number of people who had come out to see them. And the neighbors, from what they said in their interviews, the neighbors never gave them a problem in this more exclusive neighborhood because they saw that they were connected. Whereas the previous neighborhood, they said, we often got people harassing us. We had, when they found out a Black family had bought the house from our white friend, they offered to buy the house from us, but I'm like, I'm not moving. Well, we can affect your business because he had a funeral parlor and he had an insurance company and thing. He's like, no, you're not gonna disrupt my business. You're not gonna hurt me because most of my clientele are Black and the white morticians aren't gonna bury Black people. So nice try. But yeah, it's interesting to see how all that works out within not just that area, but the different time periods of how there's still this push from the Black community, and there's even unity between the Black and Latina community, as well as the white community and Asian community, to push forward. Like one thing that I'm thinking about right now that I just recalled, the Chinese restaurants, which were in the Black neighborhoods, the Chinese restaurants, once there were Black newspapers, they advertised in the Black newspapers. I could not find advertisements for Chinese restaurants in the white paper. Well, I shouldn't see the white paper, the mainstream paper of like the Arizona Republican. Which another thing I couldn't find in the Arizona Republican was when, to go back to the discussion of the Klan, was when there was a massive I don't know how to put this, but there was just a cosmic change within Arizona where people on Monday didn't know there were any Klansmen in the state. And then Tuesday, after there's a police raid on a Los Angeles Clavern or whatever they're called, a ledger was found with about 25 names of prominent people in Arizona, in Phoenix, businessmen, men in politics, and it just blew the lid off of this. Excuse me, it blew the veneer off of this idea that Arizona was a northern city. You had a lot of people that were tied up with the Klan. And when the newspaper, which again, it's interesting the direction the newspaper took. The direction the newspaper took was almost supporting the people who were being accused, because there were men that were saying like, no, I thought the Klan, I thought this was a business club. I didn't know. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I thought this was like a businessmen's association. And what I also found out from doing my research is the man who owned the newspaper at that time, Dwight Hurd, um, was rumored to have been the leader of the Klan in Arizona. So he's owning the newspaper, but the stories that are coming out about the Klan and even the stories that had come out about the birth of a nation were all kind of soft as far as like hitting it. And even when it's talking about these men that have been exposed as being in the Klan, the paper almost takes their word as, oh yeah, this is common mistake. You go to these meetings, they put a hood on you,
They're burning a cross. It's just,
So typical.
just having fun. Just
If
having
I
some
had a
bonfire.
nickel for every time I walked into a place and there was a burning cross.
I thought they were ghosts. I thought it was a Halloween party. Come on.
And even the tone when it came to the anti-Klan laws that were being passed in the city and state, the paper then kind of takes this direction of like, yes, we should support things to prevent groups like this from existing. Wink, wink. Don't look into my past.
I have a question, Don. Like, because when you mentioned like the black families moving into exclusive neighborhoods, quote unquote, like in Kentucky when that happened, like when Ann Braden did that in Kentucky, like her house got fired. The house got firebombed.
Right.
Extensive violence. That it went from being Lexington itself, like they would have to, like, the white political class would have to pander to the black voters in order to get elected sometimes when the race was very close. And it seemed like it sounded like a quote as much as it could be in a southern state, quote unquote, peaceful coexistence. But then that happened and it just went to shit. I guess the question is like just a little bit more in depth. Like, why do you think it never got that violent? It seems like it could have. It seemed like there was a mix, like a powder keg that could have gone off, but just for some reason it didn't. Like, you have Klansmen, you have white people that are like, more black people and minorities are moving in. Like, I guess why do you have anything in your research, you have an opinion on like why it didn't pop off like it did in other places, even outside the South?
There are a couple of moments where there was violence or racialized violence. So you had the Thanksgiving riot that takes place in 1942, 1943. And it was really involving military personnel. So with respect to housing, I didn't see anything where it was anything more than, hey, you'd probably be more comfortable living in the black part of town. We'll pay you for your house. Oh, you're not going to move? Well, we tried. I didn't see anything where, or at least from the interviews from the people who did, move into those neighborhoods, there was nothing that was stated other than our neighbors didn't talk to us, or we might have, been confronted by somebody who, again, wanted to buy the house or wanted us to, or gave us a reason to move. But there was never, guys showing up with shotguns and threatening us, or, a brick through the window or firebombing, anything like that. But the Thanksgiving Day riot, do I have it right here? Yeah, it's 42. So the Thanksgiving Day riot was because of military personnel that had been moved into the Phoenix area. And I don't think it was Luke Air Force Base yet. That was to the west. But black military personnel were moved there. And you also had German POWs. And basically it came down to, there was a disagreement over the treatment of black troops versus German POWs. Those black troops did not like the way they were being treated, stood up for themselves, and there was some shooting, there was some fighting. I think about 100 black troops got arrested out of all of it. But as compared to what it could have been, it was virtually nothing.
Like, compared to what happened in Houston, like in 1917, right, where they literally massacred, for good reasons, massacred half the police force. Which, way to go, critical. Like, I know what, full on support for the black troops in Houston in 1917 who literally massacred half the Houston police force.
And you know what?
Fucking way to go.
that Houston massacre was one of those things that the 369th, the Harlem Hellfighters, were worried about, because when I should say the U.S. military was worried about as well, because they used black troops in predominantly white Southern areas as a way to, I guess you could put it no other way than saying, to drive a wedge between the two groups. So if you were black from another part of the country, or even from the South, and you get stationed in the South, we ensure that you're not going to leave base. You're not going to leave base. You're definitely not going to leave alone. So you're going to stay there and train. And if you happen to be a white Southerner, the fear is, oh shit, the federal government's putting all these black troops here. What's going to happen? When all it really was is, or what it really could come down to is, there were people that wanted them to fail. We know that you guys don't like them, so you're going to probably take any chance you have to attack them, which happened in a few cases. And we want to see if you, as black troops, are going to retaliate and fight against them. If you fight against them, boom, problem solved. We don't have to send you to Europe. We're not going to send you as part of the expeditionary force. We can kick you out of the military, and we can go ahead and say that this experiment is over. But it's the way the military worked, and in some cases still works. We're going to try and figure out a way to set you up for failure.
Mark, you gotta do it.
No, it has to happen naturally. You can't it's not on the spot like that. It has to be natural.
Mark is not your personal soundboard, Nelson.
Okay.
It has to be holistic.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Organic. Synonyms.
Thank you, Mark. Oh man. Well, Don, that was great. Are you gonna so the dissertation, is it gonna get published, or we're gonna be able to read it outside of academia? Or
I will have a what's it called? I'll have an embargo on it for a little bit, but that doesn't mean I can't get copies for people who want to read it.
Smuggle it out.
I'm gonna have an embargo because between this and a friend of mine who's working on, I'm not even gonna say what she's working on, she has been contacted by a lot of people for the information that she's been researching. And it's because she found somebody who basically was missing in the historiography for so long. And I told her day one, along with other people, I'm like, don't you tell anybody what you're working on. And she's like, well, why? Because she wasn't a historian by trade. I said, because people will steal your shit. People will steal your shit. Finish it, get your research published, and then they can use it as a source. You do not want to tell anybody where you got your stuff from, what you have, anything like that. So with this one, I'm like, you do enough digging. I mean, you can find the stuff I'm talking about. It's just an issue of putting it all together. Whereas hers, I'm like, I wouldn't even risk it. Like, it's such a good idea, such a good project that I'm like, I want to see what you've got when it's done. So I have to be careful, even as I'm talking about, because I know what it is, but I'm like, holy shit, I wish I had thought of that. That's great. No one's talking about this, but you are the perfect person to do this research, because it's merging her previous field with her current field. So I'm like, this is great. This is an outstanding direction. But no, as far as mine, like I said, I'll do an embargo until I get the San Diego and possibly LA stuff, or even the San Diego. And there's I forgot the name of the community that was outside of Denver, but there was like a small black community that formed outside of Denver. Basically the same thing. Like, we need to escape the South. And that was one of the reasons why a lot of black people were leaving at the time. We just want to get away from the Jim Crow South. We want to have normal lives. People are saying Phoenix is the place to go. Arizona's the place to go. So this is what I need to do. And then as they got there, like, this is not the wonderful place that people told me it was.
Wait a minute. You're saying white people are the same wherever you go in the country?
Oh, no, I don't mean that. I mean, as far as like what?
That's I would have been like,
oh, this is an oasis. It's a paradise. And I'm like, what are these things stinging me?
Oh, I would have said,
why is it so hot?
What is this?
Then, yes,
what is this? There's
was
this
a
thing
racial
rattling.
component as well.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like, yeah, we want to be part of the city, and we're not gonna take second class citizenship, but because they could vote, because they own property, and because you had some that were making a respectable amount of money, they were able to do what they needed to do. And so I, even in the dissertation, I get into the argument about Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, because the churches in the summer of 1911, they're like, we're going to have a great program in the fall. We're going to have this speaker, this speaker, this speaker, Booker T. Washington, this speaker, or W.B. Du Bois at East Lake Park. I'm like, are they soliciting people in the paper to come to an event that they don't even know who the speaker is going to be in 3 months? And the only reason why Booker T. Washington, I shouldn't say the only reason, they ended up getting Booker T. Washington to come and speak in 1911, and it was because he was the first one to respond, or at least the one that definitely responded and said he would come. They're like, we'll pay for your travel, we'll take care of your housing. And so when he came to Arizona, he said, oh, this is great. This is a great place for you guys to be. And I'm just seeing such great racial harmony here. And I'm like, what you're seeing is a place that's different from Tuskegee, Alabama. That's what you're seeing, is something different than that. But what he was arguing, which is one of the problems I have with Booker T. Washington as an historic figure, is that he put, wait for politics, wait for political power. You don't need to do that. Work hard.
That Atlanta Compromise.
Oh, every time I look at that and people praise Booker T. which he has a reason to be praised, but there are so many things that he possibly prevented because of the accommodation perspective. Whereas Du Bois is like, no, fuck it, get it now. Fight for it now. Like, why are you going to wait for rights? Like, why are you going to wait for political freedom? And as a result of them taking the accommodationist position, you did have power brokers like Crump, like Bayless, like Shelton, like the Ragsdales later on. But the Black community did not have any representation in the state government until 1951. And in that same year, they elected two people, one out of Tucson, one out of Phoenix. And the reason the guy won out of Tucson was, one, he was a war veteran, he was a decorated war veteran from World War II. But more importantly for people in Tucson, he was a standout football player in high school. So they knew him from playing football. He came back. He became the first Black attorney in the state. He ended up also being the first Black judge in the state, but he was one of the first Black people elected to the state legislature. And in that year, that law I was telling you about with the schools, prior to Brown versus Board of Education, he got on into the state legislature in 1951. And in his duties in the state legislature, he rewrote that state statute, because it was a territorial statute and it was adopted, became a state statute. He rewrote the state statute to explicitly say, divide students based off of race, and then basically handed it off to some attorneys and like, here you go. That's all you need. And so then they challenged the state law and had it thrown out because the state Supreme Court ruled that you cannot discriminate based off of race. And the reason why they were able to get away with it so long was there wasn't an explicit enforcement or statement about you have to separate your students by race. But when the judgment came through, like the school district doesn't have the power to do this. And the city government doesn't have the power to do this. So what the hell are you guys doing? This is stricken. So schools in Arizona are desegregated a year roughly before Brown versus Board of Education. And even as they were desegregated, there were practically no incidents when they were desegregated. And the reason why they were practically no incidents is because, not that you fully integrated the schools, because we saw that with busing, you had to get people. Mm-hmm. It's because Black people lived in one area and you had the schools that were nearby. White people lived in another area and their schools were nearby. So what you really ended up having was primarily Mexican American students that would go into a white school. You had some that were now in a school that had previously been all black. So now you got some brown black unity, and now you got some brown white, interaction. Because there were some incidents there, because especially as the 50s and 60s were kicking off, you start getting even more xenophobic with a lot of the language, and some of those kids, man.
Those damn kids.
I mean, I didn't go through the greatest time period of school in the South, but I couldn't imagine going to school in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when people are arguing over busing and desegregating and things. Because I have family members who went through it. I don't understand how they made it.
I will never have that conversation with my dad. He went to Catholic school in the South, but I will never have. I can only imagine what my racist guinea grandfather from Boston and my Southern belle grandmother, the conversations at that fucking dinner table. Oh my God. Ugh.
Now I want those conversations. I want those recorded.
Well, they're dead.
I'm sure there's somewhere.
We'll get the board out. Oh no, I have plenty of quotes from my grandfather because he lived to 94 of things he told me. I remember one time I made the mistake of telling him that I like Grape-A-Co. I really like Grape-A-Co soda. It's great. It's a great soda. And I'm like 11 or 12, and my grandfather turns to me and says, "The only people who drink Grape-A-Co are..." Yeah. I was like, well, I guess I should have been like, I guess you got a black grandson then. Oh my God. I was just like, I was like, now I realize why my mother kept me away from you for so long. Oh man.
He was ashamed of you.
And he's the child of immigrants that lived in Boston. He's just racist as shit. It's Boston. It's just something in the water in Boston makes everyone who's just racist.
This is what you miss from social media, because I just had a post about states you wouldn't go to, and it was just like, I'm just not interested in some of these places, and the Boston people were heated.
Oh yeah,
don't you realize how good it is? It was like, I'm good.
I did a TikTok on the Boston busing riots, and all the white people were like, "How dare you!" Blah, blah, blah. And the black people who live in Boston were like, "Yeah, man, this city's racist as fuck."
Oh, to make another connection to make a connection to Arizona with Boston. This is something I gotta tell you, because this is some research that was stolen from me by, and I don't care, AZ Central, Channel 3, Arizona, Phoenix. One of your reporters stole this from me because I gave him the information. I thought we were going to have a nice little feature about it, but
he's banned from the podcast forever.
He used it and didn't give me credit for it.
Wow.
So there was the last team in last team in Major League Baseball to integrate was the Boston Red Sox. Ironically, it was the Boston Red Sox. A state that talks about being progressive and all, and like you couldn't do that with your baseball team, couldn't be integrated. So they're the last team to integrate, and I think it's like around 53, maybe 55. They are having spring training during this period. Spring training for Boston is in Arizona. So it's not in Florida like it is now. It was in Arizona. The team stayed in Scottsdale. And just to give you an idea for those of you who are listening, you've got Phoenix, Scottsdale is to the northeast. And I mean, like Phoenix, everything is basically connected. So you cross the street, you're in Scottsdale, but it's to the northeast. It's more exclusive. It's referred to as Snobsdale because they honestly think that they're Orange County, California. They think they're Beverly Hills. They're not, despite the money that's there, despite, whatever the mindset is there. The team stayed in Scottsdale, a hotel there, but because of the local restrictions in Scottsdale, Black people were not allowed to stay at the hotel. Now, as opposed to the team saying, to hell with you, we're not staying at this hotel. Pumpsy's on the team with us. He's a Red Sox too, blah, blah, blah. The team stays in the hotel. Pumpsy Green, who's the first black player for the team, is then transported 17 miles away to South Phoenix to stay at the Swindle Tourist Home. So there are no hotels in Phoenix that are gonna accommodate him. There are no hotels in Scottsdale. So the team every day drives him 17 miles from South Phoenix up to North Scottsdale and back. So if they have a night game, they're driving him back at night and then picking him up early in the morning the next day. And just even thinking about, like, how ridiculous is that? Where I can't stay with the team. You think about the camaraderie that you could build, the friendships, the bonding, all that stuff. And for someone to basically say, you know what, I'm not staying in the hotel. I'm going to go stay with Pumpsy. I'm going to, let's all go stay. So that's one of those Disney moments where you sit there like, this shit would have not happened in the 1950s. They wouldn't have like jumped up and all gone and said, hey, I'm going to be your best buddy. I'm going to be your new best friend. And we're all going to get together because we need to stay together.
We all know how the Irish are with buses. We all knew what was going to happen. They're not going to that hotel.
But it was just funny because, the Swindle Tourist Home was a craftsman home. I think it was built in 1911 or 1913, and it's still there to this day. A guy has an accounting firm out of it. But it's remarkable that there was so much history that took place in this house just because Black people were not allowed to go across the street and stay at some of the hotels. So, oh gosh, I forgot his name. I think Louis Armstrong stayed there. Jackie Robinson had stayed there. Pumpsy Green had stayed there. There were notable entertainers, athletes, and dignitaries that stayed in that home because that was the best logistical place for them to stay. Plus, it was the only place that they weren't able to stay at other places in the city, so they had to stay in South Phoenix. You stayed at Swindle Tourist Home. Had a nice meal. You might go down to the Elks Lodge. They'll take care of you, get some drinks, maybe party, and then go do your gig. So the musicians that stayed there were some wild stories about how, they had to stay there and they would go and play, and they wanted to have some more extracurricular time, but they couldn't because they had to go back to the tourist home. They couldn't have fun like they could in other cities.
Racism's stupid.
I know. I can already see that. I can already see the comments when this gets released, which is, "How dare you say this about this city? I can't believe that you would." Jar Arpaio.
Oh,
terrifying. Like I remember the last time you came on, like I think afterwards we were talking about what we could do as our next show, and I remember saying, like, when I was growing up, Arizona was the scariest fucking state for me because that was kind of the era of Joe Arpaio, and this kind of like the feeling that I always got off of it was like this Wild West, they will fuck you up for anything out there kind of feeling about Arizona. And like all this like you have to stay in tents outside, and they would like they dressed them in
pink underwear,
pink underwear, bologna sandwiches.
It's 120 degrees in the shade.
And that's what I still don't understand about people who live there, who support the tent city, because I think the newest sheriff who would come in got rid of it or planned to get rid of it. I haven't been back, so I don't know if he did or not. But there were people that have been like, well, it's jail, so what do you expect? And it's like, I expect you to treat people humanely. like, why are you out here in tents? Because Jar Arpaio's thing was like, well, our military, our troops are out in Iraq, and they're in 120 degrees with tents. I'm like, buddy, we have air conditioners in those tents.
Yeah. We all saw the 60-minute report. They're getting fed lobster dinners, like from Halliburton. Like they get their clothes washed for them. Like it's not the same.
It's not. But even if that were the case, then that's not even a good comparison to make. Shouldn't you say like, well, maybe we shouldn't be there if it's 120 degrees, or why am I putting out all these people who and making people susceptible to heat exhaustion, sunstroke, anything like that, when these people are awaiting their court dates? These people haven't been convicted of anything. They're awaiting their court dates. Even DMX, I remember DMX going to the jail, and his when he got released, it was the funniest thing, because as soon as he said it, I felt it, and he was like, "Nah, fuck Arizona. I'm never coming back to this place again." I was like, "I'll go to jail anywhere but here."
Ain't going there.
And then I think Charles Barkley had his DUI, and of course, because he's Charles Barkley, he didn't get as a severe sentence as everybody else. So I think they made him stay like a weekend for a DUI charge. And when he came back to the studio, he was thankful for the support and things like that. But I was disappointed, because I was thinking to myself, like, you stayed in there over the weekend, or it might have not even been the whole week. It might have just been a day. I can't remember. It was a while ago. You don't want to advocate for anybody who was in there. Like, you could have one of these moments where you're like, holy shit, I see that there are people in there all the time. I'm sorry, that people have been in there for months that are just awaiting a drug possession charge that, can't see a judge, but you can't afford bail. So you got to stay in this place, this piece of shit tent city that this psychopath decided to create. And the boomers that happen to live in Phoenix and in the Maricopa County area, which is his jurisdiction, look at it and think it's funny. Like, well, that'll teach you. These are the same people that think you'll get a job by going around knocking on doors.
Oh my God. Holy shit. Kai, we were just talking about that the other day. The boomer parents like, go and hand your resume to the manager and tell him who you are. It's like, it's the internet. It's not how it works anymore. Holy shit.
Why do homeless people need phones to get a job? I'm like, what do you don't think that the person had a phone before they were homeless, and them having a $20 or $50 bill does not mean that they're $50 away from having a home or having housing? I don't know. That could be a whole nother episode.
So lead poisoning. They're all lead poisoned.
Oh God, don't get me started.
The lead poison boomers. Anyway. Oh my God. Kai, Mart, y'all have any other questions?
No, I just say when we have somebody on who actually knows what they're talking about, I just sit here and listen.
Sponge.
Same.
When is that going to happen? I need to tune
in. You're so funny.
Hey, if I'm not self-deprecating, I'm not.
You have a healthy mental image of yourself, which is what you should have anyway. You've been here twice now. You've been here twice, so you get the same thing that I give these other two chuckle fucks. That you're going to have a healthy self-image, and you're going to value yourself, and you're going to come on here and say, "Yeah, I know what I'm talking about." So listen to me.
Yeah, I do. It's just like when I see those people who overdo it, as far as like, I'm the expert on this topic. I'm like, shut up.
Kai's gonna be there. Kai's gonna be there when you defend. She's gonna be like, "You're gonna do fucking great."
Is she gonna be the Mickey to my Rocky?
This is gonna be the Disney sports movie moment. I'm gonna be in there sponging your forehead, going, "You got this. You got this."
Kai's gonna be in full regalia.
Quack, 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 quack.
Yes. Oh
first I'm gonna run in saying, "We are the Titans, mighty mighty Titans," and then I'll do the quack quack quack.
Do you believe in miracles? Yay! Okay,
if you build it, they will come. I don't know. I'll just keep building lines.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Miracle is a true story. That was a great movie. But no, yeah, the fucking Field of Dreams, Radio. There's another one.
God.
Oh my God.
I'm so bad.
Wait, what? Kai, you broke up there. What?
I'm too white passing to do this. It'll look really bad.
Oh, yeah.
No, just don't put anything on. You'll be fine.
Yeah, you just show up in full regalia. Just be like, as a member of the Mohawk Nation, we demand that you give this man his PhD.
Hey,
I
then my
showed up
committee will
when
look
you
at me
gave
like,
a
did you read his paper? Nothing makes sense. I'm like, it's Arizona. Oh, okay. Well, we understand.
Okay. When do you defend? Have you gotten a date or anything?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I had to basically tear everything up and then rewrite the first chapter. And it wasn't anything bad. It was just I wanted to go thematic approach. And then the last meeting I had with my advisor, she's like, just go chronological.
Mm.
And when I did that, I'm like, well, shit, now it makes so much sense. I'm not going to do a chapter on education. I'm not going to do a chapter on housing. I'm not going to, because some of the things there's not enough content for. So if I include the Klan presence and the response, that's like 2,000 words, if that. So I can talk about Birth of a Nation, and I can talk about the Klan raid in 1922, which then led to all these people coming out of the woodwork. I'm not in the Klan. I thought it was a business association. Huh? No, that's my meeting hood. That's different. That's completely different.
It's a business hood, okay?
Yeah.
Then we were ghosts. It was supposed to be. It's a Halloween. Like it's a Halloween thing. We had a bonfire. Ooh, spooky.
But no. I mean, if I move quickly with this, because what is it? The first week of January, second week of January. I mean, I could foresee getting it this May, but I'm not gonna rush it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in a good position as far as like I've got funding, so it's not like, hey, I got to do it by the end of this semester, or else I'll have to pay everything myself. So I've got good space right now.
All right.
I do want to get it done before the end of the year. I mean, I don't want to be that guy who it took you 7 years to write your dissertation. What happened? I'm like, shit, I don't know. I forgot all the material. But I guarantee you, once I'm done, I will never. I'm just going to be done talking about Arizona. I'll just move on to somewhere else in the Southwest.
Next hit, you cross Arizona off your list.
Yeah, exactly.
John.
They'll be like, what are you writing about now? San Diego. Why? Because San Diego. That's why.
They pissed me off. That's why.
You're just gonna get banned from all these states.
No, San Diego. It'll be a good story.
Oh, okay.
It'll be a good one about because this does lead into the other one. There was a neighborhood. Oh damn! It's been almost a year since I looked at the document. But there were same situation as far as you had Mexican neighborhoods in San Diego, and it was more in the southern part of San Diego. The Mexican neighborhoods were made up of descendants of people who had participated in or left Mexico during the revolution in 1917. And or it wasn't just in that year, but just in the first quarter of the 20th century. So when all these restrictions, when they'd moved in and all these restrictions are hitting in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, these folks were fighting back. Like they're like, you're not going to bring that bullshit here.
Yeah.
You're not going to tell us to separate our school. It's not going to happen. So even when it came to there's this place that was affectionately known as Clan-T, it's Santee, California, but known as Clan-T for a while. And what ended up happening was a good number of the white racists moved themselves to Clan-T or Santee, moved themselves to Santee because they knew if they fucked around with any of those neighborhoods, any of those parts of San Diego, they were going to have some problems. They had such big problems that in the early part of the 20th century, the Klan Hall in San Diego got burned down. And the articles that I was reading, I mean, the pictures are hilarious just to see all these Klansmen or these people who just happen to be checking out the building that was on fire. When they showed up, you just see all these little sad faces where you see a building that's on fire, you're not going to have a sad face unless you have a connection to that building.
Yeah.
But you have all these guys, in their button-up shirts with their sad faces and hands on their head and just completely distraught. I'm like, yeah, that guy was a Klansman. They never found who burned the building down. And a rumor is it was the Black and Hispanic community as well as the Asian community that came together because they're like, we're not going to take this bullshit.
Hell yeah.
But no one, I mean, I looked through the archives in San Diego, and I couldn't find anything from anyone who was like, well, yeah, this person was arrested. This person was arrested. There was nothing on it. But I read earlier papers from people that were, or letters and communication from people that were complaining about the Klan presence in San Diego. So, I mean, you might have had a rainbow coalition that got together and decided, no, you're gone.
That's the movie we need. That's
Yes.
the movie that's going to heal America. Oh, Donald, where
Not
can
Avatar?
Yo, Lord have mercy.
My
On
kid
that-
asked about it. I was like, you will never watch that movie. He's like, why? I said, one, there are much better movies that talk about indigenous representation that aren't 3 hours of James Cameron, self-gratifying himself. Look at what he did. Like, you didn't do anything. You ripped off all these other stories. Or, I'm sorry, you appropriated all these other stories to then create this. Because I told my wife, I'm like, the first one is just Space Pocahontas. She's like, what do you mean? It's Space Pocahontas. It's
I said Space Dances with Wolves.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
think
it.
it's closer to Dances with Wolves, but yes, there's a connection.
Yeah,
No, I
definitely.
say Space Smurfs. That there. I'm like, oh God. How can you make a movie that makes that much money and no one can remember anything more than one line from the movie?
Everything out
I
there.
didn't even know
wants
there
to
was a line
kill-
people remembered.
Oh, the I see you line. That's it. It's like, I see you.
Oh,
That's it. That's the only line anybody can ever remember from that movie. But yeah, I will never see the second one. She did love Megan, though.
I want to see that. I definitely want to see that.
It's a really good horror sci-fi comedy.
Nice.
And that's all I'm going to say.
On that note, Donald, where can people find you? I know we got stuff from the last episode,
let's
but
see.
again,
Well, that's the point of podcast, isn't it?
exactly.
I mean, you aren't selling any weird supplements, so
Yeah,
take
There's-
our supplement. It'll increase your testosterone and give you more lead poisoning.
it's just lead.
It's just like,
it's just like,
It's just the shavings of paint off of old houses.
no, it's the fucking, it's sort of historical. It's the fucking Kyle. It was the shit Lewis and Clark took. That was just basically
Mercury?
mercury.
Oh, the mercury
The
pill.
mercury pills. Had this genuine old timey Lewis and Clark medicine that they took, and you too can shit yourself, and then people can
like a
track.
true American.
And we can track where you went by studying where there's high levels of mercury. I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of history is that we know exactly where Lewis and Clark went because where they shit was so much mercury. Because they're just fucking getting mercury poisoning the entire time. Oh man.
I would love to know how Sacagawea actually looked at them.
Probably, what the fuck is wrong with these people?
Because she's doing this with a baby on her back, walking around with two fuck off guys who are basically the living embodiments of the Mad Hatter. Because the Mad Hatter was mad from working with mercury.
What was the what? There was one slave on the. It was probably him and Pocahontas looked at each other like, man, these white folks are fucking insane.
Pocahontas, are all Indian women the same to you?
No, I said no. There was one enslaved. There was one.
No, you said Pocahontas instead
You
of
said
Sacagawea.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. My bad. No, I'm sorry. I'm not my bad.
Let me guess.
Saga-
The slave's name was Django.
Sacagawea and I forgot his name. We're probably looking at each other and saying, man, these white folks are fucking crazy. They're literally taking mercury and they just keep shitting themselves. What the fuck is wrong with them?
I did mention that on the episode that I did the opening for was the mercury filled shits of Lewis and Clark as they cross the continent.
Anyway, Donald, where can people find you?
All right. People can find me. Not that I'm really on Twitter, but you can find me on Twitter at Don Guillory, or TikTok, the Token Black Guide, and the same thing for Instagram. You can buy my books. You don't have to read them, but I'd appreciate if you bought them.
Yay!
I read them. You should buy them and read them.
Yes.
You really read them?
Yeah.
Why'd you punish yourself like that?
Again, you are going to have a positive
I
self-image.
know.
We
I'm
said
just
the
joking.
Plantation one is going to get bought by Jordan Peele, and he's going to make a horror movie out of it.
Jesus, I hope he does.
That'd be sick.
Like I know, as if we're going on tangents, we said last time we should have an episode where we like deconstruct horror because you'd be the perfect like person for that. Like we need to do this one because I've been begging for it for years.
Do it.
That's gonna be the next episode. The next episode that Don comes on, we're gonna do deconstructing horror. So pick some horror films, and we'll go with that.
Are you talking to me or Kai?
Both of y'all.
I was gonna say I'll go on any of them. From the original horror movie, which was Birth of a Nation, to.
Speaking of, Mark found a copy of that in a antique
store.
My God.
No, it wasn't even an antique store. It was Second and Charles. It's like a chain, like secondhand, like nerd store. So there's like a whole big Harry Potter stuffed animal thing, very on theme here. And then it has like all the little like anime toys and the manga sets. And then I just walk over to the I think it was like the action and the nonfiction, and there was like stuff about Hillary being evil. I'm going
Hillary's
across
America.
the names.
You remember that one?
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I think I remember what this is. Pull it out, and there's just the cover of it. Just there for $7 for anyone to pick up and take home.
A DVD of the most racist movie of all time.
And I was curious, so I should have thrown it away. I've thrown away a book in there before. I don't know why. There's too many people in there. They would have seen me and thought I was like trying to come back for it later. So I just hid it on like the very bottom shelf behind like some dusty like box set of something, like signs or something. I don't know what it was. Numbers, that kind of show.
It was a clan ledger.
All the little symbols on it. Yeah. And I look up at the register. Each one of them has a pride flag on it. And it's just if I would have followed Nelson's instruction and brought it up there and handed this movie to one of these people up there and said, yes, I would like to purchase this with my money I worked hard for. You don't have to put it in a plastic bag. I'll just take it home. We won't need to waste the plastic.
That gives me the same feeling as when we were walking through that parking lot at the corn thing that we went to. The pumpkin patch with the bumper stickers on that one car. Were like,
what was it? It was like Hogwarts, and what was it?
Oh, it was shit. It was
one of those like we believe that.
Love
is love. It's one of those.
The science is real.
Yeah,
and
it was that
racism is bad.
And the Harry Potter one.
And it had like the little Harry Potter triangle on it.
Like, don't you know the lady who wrote that is?
I should have seen the haircut that the mom had, and then it would have made sense.
Oh my God. Anyway, on that note, at Dixieland, the proletariat believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons. Those being worker means production, decolonization, and self-determination for all oppressed peoples. Make sure to check out our link tree in the show notes, where you find all our social media. We're coming to you from the birthplace of the civil rights movement, Montgomery, Alabama, as well as sweet Georgia and jolly old England. We also like to recognize we're recording on land that's occupied and rightfully belongs to the Muskogee and Cherokee Nation. Donald, thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you.
I'm glad that we have somebody who knows what they're talking about. And that's you. You know what you're talking about. As a member of the Bald Brotherhood, I salute you.
Bald Brotherhood.
The Bald Brotherhood. God, I love my favorite skits. Mark.
Am I a man? Or am I a Muppet?